Welcome to Confidently Speaking, the podcast that'll get you to fall in love with your own version of English.
Hello, everybody. Very good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you guys are in the world. Welcome to the very first episode of my podcast. My name is Frank Chavira, and I can tell you how excited I am to finally set some time aside and stop procrastinating on this project that, believe it or not, I've actually been thinking about for the past 17 years. I know, 17 years ago, podcasts were just starting, right? Nobody knew about them, only geeks and nerds, myself included, of course, right? But nobody actually knew what podcasts were, and I only read about them on, tech magazines. At the time, I used to have a MacBook, and I read, I think it was a magazine called Mac Life, with everything related to Apple devices. So, at the time there weren't many. There were just the iPod and the iPhone was about to come out. But yeah, that must have been in 2006, 2007 when I was working for Royal Caribbean, which is a cruise ship company. And I must have been somewhere, in the open sea, close to the US, because that's, the route that we used to follow. But I had quit my job as the English coordinator at a very large school here in Guadalajara, Mexico, and gotten this job at Royal Caribbean. Right, so I was in charge of the youth staff. Well, not in charge of them. I was part of a youth staff team. And what we did on board the ship was to run activities for kids and teenagers so that they wouldn't get bored, right? They had the time of their lives as their parents, hit the casino, right? So, okay. At the time, I had quit my job. I knew I wanted to be an English teacher. I had already finished my bachelor's degree, had already obtained my bachelor's degree from university. And, I got this job because I wanted to test out how my English was, like how good it was. Everybody said that my English was good. And I just wanted to test it out outside of the bubble I had created for myself here in Mexico. So went over there, and as I, carried out my daily activities, I knew I had to, when I came back to Mexico, because I knew I would come back eventually, I wanted to do something different, something that nobody else was doing. And, I was also quite into music back then, wasn't particularly good at anything, but I used to play a little bit of guitar. I used to sing a little bit. Probably in the future, in future episodes, I'll sing a little bit so you can listen to the power of my voice, right? And how beautiful it is. But that's something for another episode. Now, what I wanted to tell you was that this new thing that I was looking for, I thought about creating a magazine, for example, when I came back to Mexico, and, offer a magazine for English learners, with tips and tricks on how to pronounce words better, on how to, improve your speaking performance, your speaking skills. And that's what I had in mind. But then I read this magazine that actually talked about podcasting. I had already dabbed a little bit into recording software. Right, I knew a little bit about microphones and DAWs, which stands for Digital Audio Workstations. So that's exactly what I thought. Now, mind you, this was 17 years ago, right? So everything was fairly new, and I made up my mind to start a podcast once I came to Mexico. But as fate would have it, I came down. I got a job again at the very same school where I had quit before, but this time it was an outsourcing type of gig, it was more of an internal job, right? They asked me to create the whole English program for the students at the school. And so I did. They offered, a good enough pay so that both my wife and myself would start working there. My wife is also an English teacher. So they, gave me free reign. That means that I could hire as many people as I saw necessary, as long as I backed it up with, relevance. And they allowed me to choose the material I wanted to. The teachers, right? The standard for teachers that I would hire. So they just gave me, basically free will, right? So I couldn't let that opportunity pass. My wife and I had already quit our jobs at Royal Caribbean, so it was an interesting time. So I had to learn the ropes again on how to run the English program that I was about to create back then. And so I did, right? And then I don't know what happened, but for some reason, I just never actually had the commitment to sit down and actually record a podcast. I did so for a little bit. I created a podcast like 13 years ago, about recording from home. I think it was called a home recording or something. And it wasn't as widespread as it is nowadays, right? I mean, you just go into YouTube and you find a lot of people giving you tips and tricks on how to record from your home, right? The equipment. Also, equipment was very expensive back then, right? But now here's the thing. I always had this idea in mind. And, besides having the idea, I also acquired everything that I needed to record the podcast. But I never really sat down and did it. And then I let 17 years go by. And, here we are today, right? So that's the story about this podcast. I got to let you know, guys, that I'm super excited about actually, because it wasn't even that I didn't have the time. I just found it, just like when I started my Instagram page or my Facebook page or my TikTok account. It was a challenge that I knew I could undertake, but I don't know. It's like these self-imposed limitations that we all do onto ourselves, right? And I was like, what if nobody listens to it? Well, the same thing happened with my Instagram account, right? Like, what if nobody likes my content? What if nobody really wants to learn English from me? And it turns out that at least, at the time of this recording, I have around 200,000 followers on all of my social media combined, right? So I guess at least 200,000 people are interested in listening to me and in having me help them acquire the language, right? Improve their pronunciation. And here we are. That is the reason why I started this podcast. I want you to practice your pronunciation. We're going to talk a little bit about grammar, vocabulary, but pretty much this podcast has, like a twofold intention. That means that one of the objectives is, yes, to help you learn English and practice everything about this beautiful language that I decided to devote my whole life to. And the second objective, we can call it a secondary objective, but it's also very important for me. And that's that I need to improve my communication skills. Now, it might seem ironic that I help a lot of professionals improve their communication skills, but I need to improve my own. I need to improve my storytelling. I'm doing a lot of reading on storytelling. I need to improve the way and the cadence in which I'm expressing myself, or I express myself, right? And that's because I normally don't do it at least as much as I should. I'm not getting enough practice. And those are the two objectives, right? Have me practice my communication skills, and at the same time, have you guys improve your own version of English. All right, so now for the second part of this episode, I think it's about time for me to formally introduce myself to you. My name is Frank Chavira, and I've been teaching English for the past 24 years. All right, now I know it sounds like a lot because, well, it certainly is, right? But, a lot of people find it difficult to believe that I am still just in love with the English language as I was when I first heard it. So, sit back and relax, get yourself a very nice drink, and get ready for the story of how I became an English teacher and why I do this, gladly and with passion. Now, here's the thing. I'm thinking it was the 90s. I was just a child, and my cousins came from the US, just like any other Mexican family. I had family, of course. I had relatives in the United States. So they came over, and, it was just magical to me that they could speak Spanish a little bit. I mean, not perfectly, but they could speak Spanish. And they also spoke this mystical magic language that I just thought it was like a secret language, right? Both my cousins, both boys, interacted with each other, and I couldn't understand a word of what they were saying. And to me, that was just magical. I mean, the fact that they could talk about anything and nobody else realizing or was able to realize what they said was just nuts to me. And when I started paying attention to the way they spoke, I fell in love with the sounds, the inflection, the rhythm, the cadence. Now, of course, at the time, I didn't know about any of these terms, but I loved the way it sounded. Right? I loved that it was so different from Spanish that I just, got hooked to the language. And I guess I'm still hooked, like completely hooked on it. Right? So that was my first approach with English. Later on, I realized that there were many different languages, so it wasn't that magical. It was also spoken by, a lot of people around the world. So the mystical, ethereal part or aspect of the language just went away, but my love for it didn't fade away. So, I became very interested in paying attention to my classes, especially in junior high school and high school as well, because here in the public Mexican education system, you don't have, well, at least in the past, when I was a kid, you didn't have English until you reached junior high school, right? Or secondary school. So I started paying attention, right? And also at the time, I played a lot of video games. I mean, they weren't anything like the video games that we play with nowadays, right? But I used to rock my NES, my original Nintendo, and then the Super Nintendo. And I didn't understand why I had to do the tasks they assigned to me. I didn't understand the tasks themselves. And that's because everything was in English, unlike what we have nowadays. Everything is, even the voices are recorded in Spanish or in many other languages. Not at the time, everything was in English. So it was difficult for me to follow along. So I had this motivation to learn the language because I wanted to understand what the video games were, and also because I loved it, right? So I paid attention to my classes. Unfortunately, my teachers in the public education system weren't as good as I would have hoped. But this is just, proof. This is irrefutable proof that motivation actually trumps the teacher. And what I'm saying is that I learned a lot on myself, just getting a little bit of guidance from teachers who didn't even speak the language, right? But they made me buy English textbooks and, learning the little grammatical rules that they could teach me and also doing a little bit of investigation. Also, my mom bought an encyclopedia, which had as a gift a very huge dictionary, English to Spanish, Spanish to English dictionary. And that was just amazing to me, right? So I would pause a video game, right? I used to play a lot of role-playing games or RPG games, and there's a lot of text. So I did a lot of translating back in the day with that huge dictionary, which I believe might still be around in my folks' home. So I think I'm going to go over there and see if I can still find it, because that's part of my English learning history, right? So that's how I started learning a little bit formally, right? But it wasn't until I finished my third semester in high school that I wouldn't get any more free English lessons at school, that I had to convince my dad to enroll me in an academy, right? It's called Prolix. So I mean, after a very formal presentation on how I would take advantage of it and I wouldn't let him down, and that his investment was actually going to be that, there was going to be a return of investment if he decided to pay for my lessons. He agreed, and that was just amazing for me. The classes over there were magical, with people who actually spoke the language, teachers who knew what they were doing, and material that was actually high quality. The classmates I had, the level, the division by levels, all of it was just amazing to me. And I fell in love with the language that much more. When I finished my 12 levels, like the first 12 levels, which I believe take you to a B2 level, it was time for me to choose a career to go into university, right? And I was going through a career book. The university, of course, it's public university, because my folks couldn't afford a private university here in Mexico. Going through the pamphlet, I think it was a pamphlet or like a brochure, which enlisted all of the available majors they offered at University of Guadalajara. I realized that they had a career on English teaching as a foreign language. In Spanish, it's Licenciatura en Docencia del Inglés como Lengua Extranjera. So it's English teaching as a foreign language. And I was like, yep, this is it. This is it. So I went to university, obtained my degree, specialized in pronunciation, and here we are, guys. After several years of me teaching, oh my goodness, it's been 24 years of me teaching, inside the classroom, and this is my 5th year teaching online, going live, having one-on-one students on Zoom, teaching groups online, and nowadays doing the teaching online full time. So isn't this an amazing story? I don't know, right? I guess you guys are going to let me know what you think about this, but I am certainly grateful of my journey. It was because of English that I was able to make ends meet. It was because of English that I got to travel around the world. It was because of English that I met my wife, and now have a beautiful family. So, you know what, guys? This is going to be like the wrap up of this episode, because I don't want to make it too long. But being the first one, I thought it was necessary for me to expand on who I am, why I do what I do. And this is it. I also made it a choice, not because I'm lazy, which I might be, but because I think it's important that you guys realize that somebody who has been speaking the language for somewhere close to 30 years still makes a lot of mistakes. Somebody who has devoted their life to learn the language, learn pronunciation, grammar, and teaching it, and then speaking it for, most of the day. There's a lot of mistakes that I make, and I want these mistakes to be part of your learning journey, to listen to how I deal with the mistakes I make, the ones I catch, the ones I don't, you're going to be able to listen to it all, right? I guess you guys, as time passes, will let me know if you like that I leave the mistakes, if you want me to take them out, whatever, just let me know, guys, because this podcast is for you and also for me. So, guys, it has been great having you here. Thanks a lot. And just as a final comment, guys, remember to give your attention the value it deserves. Everybody and everything is fighting for your attention. Your attention is the new currency that drives the world nowadays. So thank you very much for giving me your attention. Hopefully this podcast was inspirational a little bit to you. And hey, wait for the next ones because they are quite educational, with a lot of activities and a lot of drills for improving your pronunciation and your speaking skills. So thank you very much, guys, and I will see you around. It was great. Bye-bye.